The Catholic Church's tradition of priestly celibacy is a long-standing practice that has been both defended and debated for centuries. However, when contrasted with the biblical model of priesthood in Jewish tradition, where marriage was not only permitted but expected, the Catholic stance appears to be a departure from biblical precedent. Furthermore, the consequences of enforcing celibacy, including widespread sexual abuse scandals, suggest that this practice may be deeply flawed. Did you know the Catholic Church did not always mandate celibacy for its clergy? In the early centuries of Christianity, many priests and even popes were married. The requirement for priestly celibacy developed gradually and became official church doctrine in the 12th century at the Second Lateran Council in 1139 AD. This took place when Pope Innocent II formally forbade priests from marrying. The reasoning behind this was largely practical rather than theological. The Church wanted to ensure that clergy did not pass down wealth and property to their children. Doing so, of course, could weaken the institution's financial and political power. Over time, celibacy was framed as a form of higher spiritual discipline, drawing from verses such as 1 Corinthians 7:32-34, which states, Paul writes that an unmarried man can focus more fully on serving the Lord. However, he never mandates celibacy, but rather presents it as a personal choice. Likewise, Matthew 19:12, Jesus speaks of those who became eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom, but this is descriptive, not prescriptive. Despite these passages, nowhere in the Bible is priestly celibacy commanded. In stark contrast to Catholicism, Jewish tradition, which is where Catholicism directly comes from, has always upheld marriage as an essential part of religious leadership. Old Testament priests were married. The Aaronic priesthood, which included the high priesthood of Israel, allowed and even expected marriage. The high priest was required to marry a virgin from among his people, Leviticus 21:13-14, to preserve the sanctity of the priesthood. This shows that marriage was seen as essential for spiritual leadership. This, of course, also echoes back to the biblical description of the nature of God, saying that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. In other words, he never changes. And if this was his prescribed order back then, why isn't it now? Again, the prophets were married. Many Hebrew prophets who acted as God's messengers were married, including Moses, who was married to Zipporah in Exodus 2:21. Isaiah, his wife is referred to as the prophetess, Isaiah 8:3. Ezekiel, he was married until his wife died, Ezekiel 24:15-18. And Hosea, his marriage was central to his prophetic message, Hosea 1:2-3. Additionally, the keepers of the Abrahamic covenant, both Abraham, Isaac, and his son Jacob, were all married, and even multiple times. To go even further, New Testament church leaders had wives. Peter, the supposed first pope, was married. Jesus healed his mother-in-law, Matthew 8:14-15. Paul defends the right of apostles to marry. In 1 Corinthians 9:5, he asks, do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord, and Cephas, Peter? Bishops and deacons were expected to be married as well. 1 Timothy 3:2-5 explicitly states that a bishop should be the husband of one wife and manage his household well. Clearly, biblical tradition supports the idea that spiritual leaders should be married and not be celibate. One of the strongest arguments against priestly celibacy is its severe consequences. Historically, the Catholic Church has faced immense sexual abuse scandals, particularly involving priests and nuns. Many of these abuses can be traced back to the unnatural suppression of human sexuality. Interestingly enough, the first commandment given to Adam and Eve was to multiply and replenish the earth, that they might have joy in their posterity. The John Ray Report of 2004, commissioned by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, found that between 1950 and 2002, over 10,000 allegations of child sexual abuse were made against Catholic priests in the United States alone. The Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report of 2018 revealed thousands of cases of sexual abuse committed by priests, with many cases covered up by the church leaders. The Spotlight investigation of 2002 by the Boston Globe uncovered systemic abuse by Catholic priests in Boston, which led to widespread revelations of abuse worldwide. It should also be noted that the Catholic Church is the largest Christian denomination in the United States, with over 70 million members. The next largest group is the Southern Baptist, with just 13 million members. Celibacy may not be the sole cause of these issues, but it creates an environment where sexual frustration can lead to deviant behavior. The very act of suppressing a natural drive can distort healthy human relationships. For example, we can look at the problem of celibacy among nuns. Abuse is not limited to male priests. Catholic nuns have also been victims and perpetrators of sexual misconduct. Reports from the Vatican itself in recent years have acknowledged widespread abuse of nuns by priests and bishops. Many nuns have also reported sexual oppression, forced silence, and emotional torment due to forced celibacy. The overwhelming biblical evidence shows that marriage was expected of religious leaders. Unlike the Catholic tradition of celibacy, which is a man-made doctrine, clearly, and biblical model, a married priesthood ensures that leaders live normal lives and have a healthy outlet for human sexuality. 2. It aligns with biblical commandments. Nowhere does the Bible demand celibacy, but it constantly upholds marriage as honorable. Hebrews 13:4. Number 3. Prevents corruption and scandals. Many of the Catholic Church's worst abuses come from the unnatural suppression of human sexual behavior. And 4. Strengthens family values. A married clergy reflects God's design for families and allows leaders to understand the challenges of family life. It can also be argued that having a family makes one a better person, more patient, more tolerant, more forgiving and understanding. And in such a case, no wonder God made it his design and first commandment to his children. To go even further, the histories of imposed sexual repression have their roots not only in the church's ambition to enrich itself, but in the activities of sexually deviant members, such as St. Augustine, who was a womanizer. His teachings that demonized human sexual nature became popular instructions for Puritans in later centuries, who went on to enforce a misguided and harsh position on natural desires, a position that some organizations and individuals still hold very strongly today. In the end, of course, celibacy in the Catholic Church is a human invention, not a divine command. The Bible overwhelmingly supports a married priesthood, as seen in Jewish tradition, the early Christian church, and the examples of prophets, apostles, and church leaders. The tragic consequence of enforced celibacy, sexual abuse scandals, corruption, and emotional suffering further prove that this tradition is fundamentally flawed. If the Catholic Church truly wished to align itself with biblical teachings, it would abandon celibacy and allow its clergy to marry, just as God intended. That's all I've got for this episode, but let me know what you think down in the description. I would love to hear your comments, which of course also support the channel by getting it out to more people. And I would very much love to hear your thoughts. Are you a Catholic, and what do you think of this practice? And with that, I am Pastor Theology, and this has been All About Your Faith.